welcome back to this week's episode of the Cedric Black Podcast, and I am your host, Cedric Black. Excited to be back again for another episode this week. As always, I'm excited and very appreciative of you guys taking the time to listen to the show and to show up to check me out, to check out what I have to talk about. And if this is your first time listening, and even if it's not, thank you for showing up. But if it is your first time, like I do with every episode, I want to just give you a brief introduction of what the show is about. It's about noise pollution, and the entire podcast itself is about noise pollution and just navigating this world of noise pollution and how it affects our mental health and our overall well-being, the way that noise makes us feel, whether in a positive way or a negative way. In a nutshell, noise pollution is excessive noise, frequent excessive noise that you don't want. It's noise that annoys you, or it's the noise that disturbs you in some way. It disrupts your peace. It can be anything from traffic to outside noise like lawnmowers, leaf blowers. It can be trucks, vehicles, loud music. Could be parties, could be your neighbors outside. Anything that disrupts your peace is noise pollution. So it seems like each episode I shorten the primer, the introduction to noise pollution, because I feel like, well, it doesn't really require a lengthy explanation of what it is, because there are so many examples of noise that can disturb us. And like always, noise is subjective. We'll talk about the nature of noise being so subjective to different people. What this episode is about this week: how can you defend against something that's invisible? We can't see noise. It has no shape other than the source that it comes from. Noise, every piece of noise that we hear has a source that it comes from. Okay, so remember the examples of noise like lawnmowers and leaf blowers. Those are physical things that we can see because those are the sources of the noise. But the sounds that it produces, we can't see that. We only hear it. And we are affected by the outcome of that. That's the outcome of the noise that we hear, the way it affects us. Can laws be put in place that could solve the problems of noise pollution? I think a lot of cities have tried to, and they do the best that they can, because that's the purpose of having city officials, to try to do what's best for the community. I think that when you have laws that's in place, one problem that you face is that to some people you may be creating a standard that is unfair, not because the law itself is applied equally, but because it can hurt people that don't have a problem with it at all. Everyone doesn't have a problem with noise the way the next person does, and that's what makes it subjective. What's good for you may be bad for me, because we're different people and we like different things and we tolerate things differently. Whenever there's a movie, where you have a college fraternity house where a lot of college kids live together, and just loud music and people there, and some neighbor always calls the police, and the police have to show up because they get the call. But what do? They knock on the door, ask the people who's throwing the party to, if you can, please turn it down. Because they asked them if you wouldn't mind, because your neighbors are complaining. Can you please turn it down? Because there's no law that says that you have to can only have a party at a certain time of the day, a certain time of the night, while your neighbors are sleeping. There's no law that says that. So they're merely asking them to be courteous to their neighbors. Because it hurts one person doesn't mean that it hurts to other people. When you want to play music while your neighbor, if like for yourself, if you want to play loud music while your neighbor wants their kids to go to sleep and take a nap, where would the police or any type of law enforcement, where could they draw the line and still be equally, and still represent both sides' interests in an equal manner? Because if you're in law enforcement or you're a city official or something that's involved with making policies and laws to help your community thrive more, to live in a more peaceful manner with each other, that would make it really difficult to get a balance between what's acceptable noise and what is not, because it's still subjective. What is loud for some people may not be loud for the next person. It's almost like a no-win situation, because you make one person happy while you're making the other person sad. So if I'm a local government official who's tasked with the job of creating city ordinances that control noise, where I manage how people reside in the community together, that's a balancing act. That's really a balancing act of a variety of interests, because you have a variety of people with a variety of noise sensitivity. So the question that I would have, the question that I think is a good question is, what is a fair standard to regulate noise? What would be fair for everyone? Can you make it fair? Can it be fair for everyone? If you're a city official, or do city officials put the noise limit at the lower end to shield more sensitive people? If so, they could risk discouraging other people from enjoying time by what they like to do. For an example, if they like spending time outside, do they create more lenient laws or ordinances that allow more noise? If so, they would also risk leaving sensitive people unprotected. So it's really a balancing act that many of them have to deal with. And I think that's the toughest part of being a city official, and the jobs that they have is to figure out how can we balance out what we want to do to protect everyone equally. Because I don't think you can when it comes to noise, because everyone hears differently. And what we hear is subjective to the way we react, because it affects us in different ways. If you remember back to my previous episode, when I used myself as an example, when I was saying that bass music, heavy or loud bass music from big speakers, didn't bother me when I was younger, when I was a teenager. I would want more of that, but it bothers me now. When I hear a vehicle pass by that's loud, that has loud music playing, that annoys me now. It doesn't make me feel good. I can't wait for it to pass me up. But when I was younger, I was one of those persons that enjoyed that. Just an example, yesterday when I was at the store, I was in the parking lot. I saw a guy get in his vehicle, and when he started up his vehicle, he sat there and he blasted his music. And it played. I sat there for 15 minutes. I was waiting for my wife to come out. I sat there for 15 minutes and he blasted his music. And he sat there. He didn't leave. He sat there in the parking lot with his music playing so loud. The worst part about it for him is he's in there enclosed. The windows were up. So it's just him and his ears. And he doesn't realize, because I didn't realize when I was younger also, the damage that loudness, the decibel of noise does to your ears. Loud for some person may not be loud for the next person. Obviously, it wasn't loud to him. It will. We know that as time goes on, as he ages and his interest changes and he has life experiences, it will change because that's what life does. I remember when COVID was changed the world as it did. And what we saw with COVID was not only did we see the way that it shut things down and shut people in, but it was during COVID that a lot of people, a lot of homeowners invested in their backyards. People started using their swimming pools more, or some people even invested in outdoor bars and set up little kitchen areas and sound systems to be able to enjoy what they couldn't enjoy before COVID. So the backyard had become a renewed entertainment focus for a lot of homes. So what does that do for a neighbor who likes peace and quiet? For a neighbor who was used to having peace and quiet? I could see that it could create a community rift between neighbors and neighborhoods, because what was once is no more. It's not so much that way now. I still see some of that, and I believe that it does exist still because people were able to discover the appreciation for their backyards all over again and to start utilizing it more, because I think that over time we did get away from that. COVID had an effect on that. That was one of the things that increased the noise. But if that happens and the other neighbor is offended or affected by it, if they call the police, if the police come out and visit, technically, what would the officer find that's breaking the law? Because annoyance doesn't really have a legal definition. There's no legal definition for annoyance. What would the police officer do? And unless that community has a specific city ordinance, which a lot of them do have noise ordinances in their city, in their areas. Like, for example, in some cities, a private residence can be penalized for making 50 decibels or more of noise after, let's say, 10 p.m. And if you've forgotten what decibels mean, it's just the way that we measure sound, or the way that we measure loudness. It's just a number that we use to measure loudness. So some cities and some areas, you can only play loud music up to so loud after 10 p.m. Or before 7 a.m. But also keep this in mind, and that's just a private residence area, your neighborhood. But a commercial property that operates at the same time, they would need to reach about 70 decibels before neighbors could make a complaint. They have a little bit more headroom to work with. The road crew or the transportation department or whatever it may be in your city, whatever it's called, they're working on the roads, and there's some construction on the road that they may be using jackhammers or drills or other equipment like that. Can we complain about it? It's just different from businesses and private homes, private residences. So another example that I would say is, I'll just use Long Island as an example because it's very suburbia, if that's even the term. The interest of commercial and residential parts of that town often conflict. I can see the conflict where it would be, because commercial districts often create more noise because there's a lot going on. It's big business, which is usually at odds or at conflict with the interest of residential communities that typically reside close to them. So where does law enforcement or how can laws be put in place that would benefit that? Noise is subjective because not everyone hears the same. Because it hurts one person, it may not hurt the other person. They may not have a problem with it. So how can law enforcement get involved, or the city officials get involved and say that this is too loud? And I can say, what's too loud? It's not bothering me. And if I want to go out in my backyard and have people over, have friends, and we have a nice time and we're laughing and joking, that's making me happy. Or my neighbor could do that and that's making them happy. Or if another neighbor complains and they say, we're too loud, and police show up and they say, you have to take it down or go inside your house. In your own yard, on your own property, they say you have to tone it down because your neighbors are not happy, they're sad. Now you're sad because the police say we have to make them happy by doing this. It can't be both ways because we hear differently. Subjective hearing, subjective listening is what we all have because we're all different. And hopefully we are able to take away something that's helpful and meaningful and educational regarding noise pollution and your mental health in the way that it affects us. So once again, thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, take care. See you next week.